welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the operating room, but we're not focusing on the surgeon. No, we're looking at the anesthesiologist, who, for a very specific group of patients, has to walk what is basically a high-wire act. You know, for most of us, anesthesia is, well, it's pretty routine. You drift off, you wake up. But what if that whole safety net was actually the most dangerous part of the entire procedure? For patients with rare muscle diseases, this isn't just a thought experiment. It's the critical reality they and their medical team face every single time. So yeah, this all comes down to a really risky combination. You have the incredibly powerful drugs used in anesthesia on one hand, and the very fragile body of a patient with a rare neuromuscular disease on the other. It means that even a straightforward surgery becomes this massive, complex puzzle that requires a whole different level of planning. So what are we actually talking about here? Neuromuscular diseases, or NMDs, are this big umbrella term for a whole bunch of conditions. Some are genetic, you inherit them, and others you can get later in life. But the one thing they all have in common is that they weaken your muscles, either by going after the muscles directly or by messing with the nerves that are supposed to control them. And look, this isn't just one single disease. NMDs cover this huge spectrum. You've got well-known hereditary ones like Duchenne muscular dystrophy, all the way to acquired conditions like polymyositis. And it's this sheer variety that makes a one-size-fits-all anesthesia plan so incredibly dangerous. The challenge for the anesthesiologist is it's a cascade of potential landmines. These patients can have totally unpredictable and often extreme reactions to standard drugs. Their breathing muscles are already weak, which makes managing their airway really tricky. Their hearts might have hidden problems you can't see on the surface. And then there's the terrifying risk of something called malignant hyperthermia, a rare but often fatal reaction to certain anesthetics. Okay, so with stakes that high, you obviously can't just wing it. Success is pretty much decided long before anyone even picks up a scalpel. It all comes down to a super meticulous pre-surgery playbook, and it is absolutely non-negotiable. You can think of it like a pre-flight check for the human body. It's a three-pronged approach. First, a deep neurological exam to know exactly which NMD you're dealing with and how far it's progressed. Second, you've got to do a full respiratory evaluation. How strong are the lungs? How well can the patient cough? And third, a serious cardiovascular workup, usually with an echo, to find any of those silent heart problems that could become a huge issue under anesthesia. All right, so all the planning is done. Now we're in the operating room. And this is where every single choice the anesthesiologist makes could literally be life or death. The tools they choose from their kit have to be selected with, well, surgical precision. And the choices are pretty stark. Some drugs are just completely off the table. A muscle relaxant called succinylcholine, it's a hard no. It can cause a catastrophic flood of potassium out of those fragile muscle cells. Inhaled gas anesthetics are also a bad idea. They can trigger muscle breakdown or that malignant hyperthermia we talked about. So instead, the go-to techniques are things like total intravenous anesthesia, or TIVA, where everything is given through an IV. Or even better, regional anesthesia, where you just numb the part of the body being operated on. But that raises a huge question, right? What happens if the surgeon absolutely needs the patient's muscles to be completely relaxed to do the operation safely? You can't always avoid those drugs. So, how do you solve that puzzle? Well, the answer is this incredible drug called sugammadex. And the absolute best way to picture it is as a molecular sponge. If the team has to use a specific muscle relaxant, like rocuronium, they can give sugammadex at the end of the surgery. It literally travels through the bloodstream, finds the relaxant molecules, racks them up, and completely shuts them down. It gives you a fast, reliable, and much safer way to wake the patient's own muscles back up. So to make all this a little less abstract, let's zoom in on one specific condition: polymyositis. It's an inflammatory disease that people acquire, it causes muscle weakness, and it's a perfect case study for all these complexities we're talking about. The main feature of polymyositis is just this profound muscle weakness. It tends to hit the big muscles around the hips, shoulders, and neck the hardest. And it's that core symptom that makes pretty much everything, especially the stress of surgery, so challenging for these folks. So, for an anesthesiologist, polymyositis brings its own special menu of risks. You get these really unpredictable responses to muscle relaxants. Sometimes they're super sensitive, other times the effect is delayed. They often have lung issues like fibrosis, which makes breathing support tricky. Heart complications are really common. And just like with other myopathies, that risk of life-threatening high potassium is always lurking. Okay, so you'd think with a tool like our molecular sponge, Sugamatics, the problem is solved, right? Well, not always. Get this. In one documented case of a patient with a related condition, it took Sugamatics 345 seconds to reverse the muscle paralysis. That's almost 6 minutes. The usual time? About 60 to 80 seconds. That's a huge difference. So what's going on? Why the long delay? It turns out the disease itself creates inflammation around the tiny blood vessels deep inside the muscle. And this basically creates a physiological traffic jam, slowing down the drug's trip from the bloodstream to where it needs to work. It's a perfect, fascinating example of how the underlying disease can totally change how even our most advanced drugs behave. So where does that leave us? What's the real path to safety? What does the anesthesiologist mandate when they're caring for one of these patients? It really is about pulling all of these different threads together into one cohesive strategy. It all rests on 4 pillars of safe care. First, the plan has to be completely individualized for that specific patient. Second, it's all about teamwork. Anesthesiologists, surgeons, neurologists, all on the same page. Third, you need constant, vigilant monitoring of everything: muscles, heart, breathing. And finally, cautious titration. That means every single drug is given slowly, carefully, watching for its unique effect. And here's the main takeaway. There is no magic bullet here. Safety isn't about picking one safe drug or one safe technique. Safety is a system. It's a whole process that starts with deep knowledge, it's built on a rock-solid foundation of planning, and it's carried out with just this incredible constant vigilance in the OR. And that leaves us with the central question of this entire challenge, right? When you're dealing with diseases that are so rare that every single patient is an exception to the rule, how do you build a system that can still guarantee safety? It's a tough question, but it's one that these incredible medical teams answer every single day with their knowledge, their planning, and their unwavering care.